Hi you guys, and welcome back. I had a bunch of people ask me some questions on do they have a 40 horse Okrasa kit, and they actually don't. They were also asking why don't they make one. I'm going to explain all that in this video and talk to you about 40 horse performance stuff you can do and the limits you can go to on them. So again, the 36 horse did not have any kind of head options other than the single port head that they came with, and they're unique engines. They don't share parts with anything else. The crankshafts on the 36s are different. The 40 horse, you can actually put a 1600 crank in one. The cases will allow the same crankshaft, they will allow the same camshaft as the 1600 to go in them. So there's a lot of options you can do with a 40 horse. One is, we're going to talk about two different sections of this. You can basically max out what your 40 horse is capable of by doing some of these things. And then there's a second option, which you can turn it into a bigger engine, like a 1600, an 1835, 1776. You can turn your 40 horse into even bigger than that. I wouldn't go too much bigger than that. We'll talk about those limitations in this video. So first of all, here's the main issue with a 40 horse. See that port size right there? That thing is tiny. So you're not going to get any top end out of this engine. The most you can do with it is build torque into it. And you can get quite a bit of torque in it, but you can also overdo it. These crankshafts are not that strong, so I'll show you. This is a 36 horse one, but you hear that, how it rings? Hold your finger on it like that. That crank is not cracked. But I'll tell you, these crankshafts were prone to breaking. So if you power it up a whole bunch and you drive it like a maniac, if you don't drive it like a crazy person, you're probably not going to break the crank on a stock 40 horse crank. But if you drive it hard and you're shifting gears hard, putting a big fat clutch in it, you're probably going to break the crank in it eventually, especially if you power it up. So your best option with the stock 40 horse, if you're going to keep the stock crankshaft in it, maybe you've got a good crank, maybe you just want to do some mods to it, maybe you're just going to run through it, freshen it up, and you want to do something to make it run faster and give you a little more power. It's not going to go that far. You want the power. You want to gear everything and make everything for bottom end horsepower, which is basically torque. You want to build it for torque. You don't want to build it for top end, because it's just not going to get it with these little ports. These little ports are not going to bring you top end power at all. And there's really no way to port that. You're going to have your O-ring goes in here for your intake manifold. If you port it out, it's just, you're not going to get much bigger than that. Okay, so you're kind of maxed out with that 40 horse head. On top of that, the valve sizes are pretty small. So the valves are a little smaller. So it's not the best combination to upgrade. And that's why the second part of the video, we'll talk about things that you can do to make them have pretty good power. So if you're running the 40 horse crankshaft and rods, you're going to be using, you have two basic options. You have your basic 77 millimeter pistons and cylinders, and you also have the 83. So the 83 pistons and cylinder is a slip-in piston and cylinder. It has a little thinner wall, but it slides right into the same opening as the 77. And they are not too thin. They're pretty thick still. And you have enough to, they still run pretty cool, especially if you change to the 1600 fan. I think the 40 horse fan was shared with the 36. I don't know. I think it had a little bit more distance between the fan blades. And the 1600 fan goes in the same hole, as long as it's not the one for the doghouse, which you could probably even add that if you wanted to. But you could put that on there, and actually have a cooler running engine. So you could do that to help make up for the cylinders if you're worried about that. Usually you don't have to. The other thing to do with it is to build a small performance cam in it. This one, you don't really want to go very big on it. but the stock cam, again, the duration was just nothing from the stock cam. So you're going to want to add a little bit more duration to the cam. So the ones that work good, again, the Scat C20 works amazing, probably in this application. Also, I think they say the 2280 from CB might work. It seems like that might be a little bit too big. Some guys use the W100 in it. They also have a W90. Those work probably a little bit better. The 100's kind of big for this engine, and you'd probably want to get the cam bores done, which is kind of an expensive job. So, the cam does not have cam bearings, so you'd probably want to have that done. But if you're going to stay cheap on it, the best way to do that is to CB or at Brothers VW Machine Shop. They have what they call a reground W100. It's not near a 100, but it's actually perfect for a 40 horse. And that's what we've got in this one. We'll see how this one runs later in a future video. So if you haven't subscribed, you're going to want to do that now. So basically, I've done the stuff in this one that basically you could do without putting too much stress on those cam. It's not a bearing, but I guess whatever, the cam surface. And it would actually work pretty good. So what I've got in here is I've got the 83 millimeter pistons and cylinders, a good upgrade for this. I've got the 1600 rockers, which are 1.1 to 1 rockers. So they're a ratio rocker in the 1600. And I've got the W100 that they sell at Reground 100 cam that they sell at Brothers VW Machine Shop. It's around, say, 350 lift and about, I don't know what the advertised duration is, but it's probably like 260 or something like that, 265. And that's going to help out with that mid-range power. We're not going to get to top end. There's not going to be top end. We've got little tiny ports here. It's not going to get there, guys. Little ports are not going to give you enough flow at the higher RPMs to make it run with power. Where the power we want is going to be at the bottom. So the other thing I'm going to do on this is I'm going to stay small in the exhaust. I've tried 40 horses with guys go and put, like an extractor on them with a larger, 1 3/8 extractor. I found they don't give you any help at all. They actually probably make it a little bit worse because you lose more torque, more bottom end torque, and you're trying to get more top end on an engine that won't put it out. So those are your limitations with a 40 horse. You can get it to run pretty good with a stock exhaust, okay, with the old pea shooter setup, right? With the pea shooter setup, these pistons and cylinders, and the heads also, I did a little bit of port work too. So if you reach in here, you'll find when you pull your valves out, you'll find there's a hard edge where it has to go around the corner on the exhaust side. You can clean that up, just get in there with a little grinder, clean that up a little bit, and make that a little bit bigger. You're going to find that that's going to help with this thing flowing a little bit better. So those are some of the things that you can do to your 40 horse base engine and actually get quite a bit more power out of it. It'll run similar to a 1500 when you do this. I mean, this thing's going to run maybe slightly better than a stock 1500 cc. So it's not bad, and it's all on the bottom. All the power's down low, especially if you stay with that small exhaust. If you go with the bigger one, you're going to be taking away from the bottom end and trying to bring it to the top end, and it's not going to have it because those little ports are not going to give it to you. The other thing I did on this one is we went to 7.9 to 1. They were stock around 7.1, I believe, and very low compression. 7.9, you can even take it up to about 8 1/4. I don't know if I'd go any higher than that. Again, this is the rule. If you don't have enough air going in, air and fuel going in, and you increase some compression ratio too much, you're going to develop heat. So that's why you want to do your max out at at like 8 1/4, somewhere in there, and that's what we're doing with this one. Again, if you go too much, you're probably going to break that damn crankshaft. So that's just the way it is. Yes, it's a Firestone hat. It's not a MAGA. Nothing against that, but I mean, you can do whatever you want. But the second option, you guys, is to actually X-nay the 40 horse crank and put a 1600 crank in it and do a little bit of machine work to the case. So you can take your, this is another 40 horse case, okay? You can take your 40 horse case, and this one has 8mm studs, so I could go a little bit bigger. If yours has 10mm studs in it and it has case savers, you're going to have some limitations here, guys, because you're going to be rubbing the old case saver if you take it up this big. All right, this one here is opened up for a 1776 or 1835 thick wall. Okay, so it's opened up for 90.5 or 92 because it has 8mm studs. So if your case has never been case savered, okay, which a lot of them haven't, the old 40 horse didn't pull case savers as easy as the later models, okay, because it doesn't have not very much compression or very much power. So in fact, it would probably break the crank easier than it would pull a case saver. Rarely ever saw one pull. So anyway, if you still got 8mm, 10mm things in here, you could put 8s in it. Okay, so you could put 8mm case savers in it. Okay, and then you could take it open to the 90.5. So now you could build a 1776, an 1835, maybe a 1904. I don't think I would do it, actually. I don't know if it'll clear. I've never tried putting a 74 in one of these, but what I've got for this one is a really good used 69 stock crank. We were putting together another engine, putting a better crankshaft in it, which is what I would most of the time suggest, and save the old one if it's good. This one's a standard, so I'm going to put that in there and going to make an 1835 in a future video. Again, if you haven't subscribed, don't want to do that now, this is time to see this video in the future. So you can take your 40 horse and you can turn it into a 1776, 1835. You could even probably do an 1800. Again, I don't know how that 74 is going to clear. Never done it before. But you can't go any bigger than that because the 90, let's say if you try and take it up for a 94, what's going to happen is this part of the case right here, let me get you guys up a little closer so you can see. But this part of the case right here and right up here on the top is very, very thin when you open it up. So if you opened it up for 94, it might have just holes all through here. Okay, these cases were a little thinner. They're not as strong as the 1600 case. So you kind of want to limit yourself on how big you go. But you can take one and make a nice 1600. Then you can put the dual port heads on it. Now the problem is, a lot of guys go, hey, well, can you interchange the 40 horse rods and the 1600 rods? No, you cannot. Well, let me just back up a little bit. It's possible, okay? If you're a master machinist, maybe you could do it. I think the 40 horse rods are slightly wider than the 1600. There was a width issue. I don't remember all the problems because there was no reason to do it. Okay, so I don't know. At one point we were playing around with it, and I can't remember all the results. This was 40 years ago, so yeah, it's been a while. A little over 40 years ago when we were playing around with this idea. And parts were cheap enough at that point that there was really no point in it. So anyway, so instead of spending a bunch of money on a kit to turn it into a bigger engine, you can just use the 1600 parts and put them on your 40 horse and open up the case. All you have to do is open up those things there, and you have to open up the heads. If you're going to go to just a 1600, you could use just stock 1600 heads and put them right on it. So there was no need for them to make a kit. There's one already made. You could just, first they would just do the 1500 add. They would use the old 1500 crank because the 1500 came out in what, like 62 or something like that. It came out earlier than people know. It came out pretty early in the buses, so they would use the 1500 crank in the 40 horse case and then they would open up the cylinders and put the bigger ones in. That's when this whole thing started. A couple of other things that you definitely want to do when you do a 40 horse. If you notice here how thick that oil pump is, I'm putting a 26 millimeter pump in there. They came with a 17. It was barely enough oil for the thing to run up to 4,000 RPMs. And when you do make it a little bit bigger, you're going to, in today's freeways, you know, you're probably going to reach those RPMs every once in a while, go above that. And I'm not saying you're going to be driving it all the time above that, but you're probably going to shift point, so it's going to be a little higher, and you're going to want that extra oil pressure, oil volume, so that you can create more pressure in the case. So definitely would do that. If you don't have the case apart and you just want to add the jugs to it, if you're going to go just the cheaper way and not do the whole rebuild, you can add the 1385 kit, and then at the same time I would go with the 1600 1.1 ratio rockers as well. No 125s, no, I wouldn't try that. 1.1s, I would put those on the old 40 horse, and you know, from the 1600, and you'll probably be pretty happy with that. Just those things alone, even with the stock cam, it does a pretty good size improvement with the 1.1 rockers and the and these. Now it still is missing the duration in the cam. So if you're going to split the case, do the cam too. Believe me, you'll be so happy you did. So once you've turned it into a 1600, now you can buy, you know, if you've gone that direction, you can actually just go ahead and buy the dual carb kits. You can put the 2-barrel on it. There's so many more options you can do. So it doesn't make that much sense to stay with the 40 horse crank, especially because all you need is that access to the case opening setup, so you can open up the case and make it bigger. Make the opening bigger for a 1600. That's usually all people usually do. They don't usually go to the 1776 because some of them have been case savered, and with the 10 millimeter stud, it's just too close to the opening. And that area is very thin on those cases. So you have to be careful even going up to the 1776, because you'll have voids in it a lot of times. You'll have little places where it's actually just a hole in the side of the case. And it won't make any difference really. It's just not that strong. So you just be aware, you know, you're not going to want to power that thing up, start cranking up the RPMs. It's just not the engine for that. So once you've gone to the 1600, then you have more options. You can put, and when you do that, for sure, this one here, I did the cam bore. I did the cam bore, pay a little more money because it's going to get a little more RPMs in it and stuff like that. I'm going to go with a little bit bigger cam in it. So I went ahead and did the cam bore on it. You know, it's kind of an expensive thing to do because you're looking at, you got to pay to have these open. The cam bore thing, you're probably going to spend $300 or $400 on the case at least, just doing those two things. And then you're talking, you got to get a line bore, well, a line bore as well. So you might be up to $400 on a case, on a 40 horse case. And, you know, then you might want to consider, well, maybe I should just go ahead and just buy the 1600. But, you know, this does save, you know, what's a new case? There's $700 to $1,000 now or more. Yeah. So you could probably do that with your 40 horse case and at least have some more power and do some more things. And then you can put the 1600 heads on it. Or if you don't want to go that direction, you can put single port heads on it too. So there's all the options that you can do with the bigger engines that you can do with the 40 horse, because they have the same cam length, they have the same crankshaft length and all that stuff, and actually the sizes are all the same as the 1600. They all share the same thing. So that's why they didn't make it. That's why they didn't make the kit for the 40 horse, and that's why there's no need to. There's just, you could do all that stuff. So anyway, I'll talk to you guys in the next video. Hope you enjoyed that. Please like, share, and subscribe.